Glenn, where do you even start with that one? After what was an epic on Wednesday, Norwich City beating Bristol City 3-2, sorry. We came to Carrow Road today with probably a raised sense of expectation around this game, and ultimately we're probably all going to go home feeling a little bit disappointed. Welcome to the Pinken channel, whichever one you happen to be watching this on. My name's Connor Southwell. This is my post-match verdict after Norwich City 1, West Brom 1. As you can see, that side, the lawnmowers are out behind me. Hopefully you can't hear them too much. I've got a microphone, so hopefully that will help. This was not great, was it? It wasn't a great game of football. It wasn't a great Norwich City performance. And ultimately, they've still come out with a point, and probably a point that, in the circumstances, they should absolutely run for the hills or the international break and try and escape out of here without anyone noticing, because it was a really poor performance all afternoon from Norwich City. Unforced errors aplenty, structurally really poor, in possession really sloppy, out of possession really lethargic, flat from their attacking play. And you kind of felt it from kickoff, really. It was just a really sort of, if I could visualise it, it'd be that as a performance. You know, you can probably find words or appropriate words to slot into that. But interestingly, I spoke to Sam Byram after the game, and he mentioned that there was a little bit of illness in the Norwich camp at the moment. Whether that is anything that we can attribute to this performance, Dean Smith's kind of cited and put the feelers out. They didn't say this explicitly, but kind of wondered if out loud if it was a mental fatigue that was the result of this performance. I actually think they came up against probably the best team they've played against this afternoon, this season so far. Sorry, and a team whose league position and points return really don't represent what they are as a football team. That being said, I felt Norwich played in their hands all afternoon. They were organised, they were structured well, as Steve Bruce's teams usually are. That wasn't always the case at Newcastle, but they tend to be well structured, hard to beat, defensively solid. It was a block of 4, block of 5, come on then break us down. But actually there were periods of the game where Thomas Asante, the striker, was essentially playing one against a back 5, Norwich's back 4, Tim Krul and Kenny McLean. So essentially 6 Norwich players, obviously not Tim Krul, but outfield players he was occupying. The fullbacks weren't pushing high enough. And it was just really stodgy as a performance. They really struggled to progress the ball. They tried to go long a few times. That didn't really work because West Brom were defending quite low and quite compact, particularly after the opening goal. And that made it a very difficult afternoon for Norwich City to try and really get a foothold in the game. And even as I'm sat here now, I don't really recall David Button making a tremendous save, and I don't really recall Tim Krul making a tremendous save either. So on the basis of that, one goal that from a Norwich City perspective was unbelievably poor to concede, and one from a West Brom perspective that they probably feel should have been chalked off. So that gives you an insight into what type of game this was. Low margin, low quality, really not a great watch. But Norwich City have ultimately managed to come out of it with a point. And I'm probably reflecting on that, bizarrely, a lot more positively than perhaps I have been when Norwich are winning games, which might shock you a little bit. But there is still a natural imbalance to this Norwich side. They're playing 2 right-footers on the left. The midfield just isn't functional at this moment in time. They're missing key bodies in areas that are really important. Isaac Hayden, I feel when he comes in, will make a real difference, because at the moment they're playing with 2, or trying to play with 2 6s at times. It was 1 really today in Kenny McLean, who's not a 6, and that is a very specific midfield job role, arguably the most important to do. If you're an 8, you can sometimes get away with playing as a 10. If you're an 8 playing as a 6, I think you can get exposed a little bit. He's not taking possession in the way that he needed to take possession. A lot of the time he was kind of being chaperoned to the left to try and sort of find a solution to Norwich City's natural lack of balance on that side. And that created really a kind of a lopsided midfield. And I felt all 3 midfielders, McLean, Nunez and Gabi Sara, on his first start as well, found it a very difficult afternoon. To be frank, and what it meant was Norwich didn't really get them on the ball. The space was being afforded outside a lot of the time, but then the fullbacks weren't really pushing on in the way that you would hope. They're playing on the left side with often a right footer who wants to drift inside naturally, and on the other side you've got Josh Sargent, who again wants to come inside. So when you've got 2 players wanting to be inverted, wanting to come in and join the central area of the pitch, it really creates a traffic jam, essentially, for want of a better phrase, in that area of the pitch. And you need your fullbacks to then join in, because you had 5 of Norwich City's players being occupied by 1 striker. they had 5 at one end, 4 at other. That's not enough to create chances. And I would imagine if you caught a word with Team Ibuki right now, he would tell you about how frustrated he is about the lack of service and how isolated he was for all afternoon, really. All I can really remember him doing off the top of my head was combining with Sargent in the second half to tee up a shot that was deflected wide. And this wasn't a good attacking performance from Norwich. It wasn't a good defensive performance from Norwich. It wasn't a good performance in possession. And it wasn't a good performance out of possession. And actually, they probably played better than that on Wednesday night, and we were still relatively critical of their performance, and they probably played better than that at Hull, and they lost, and they played better than that against Wigan, and they drew, and they played better than that. Well, maybe no, certainly didn't play better than that at Cardiff, but they played worse than, well, no, maybe not worse than that, but it just goes to show this kind of performance aspect of it is always evolving, and it still feels like we're all kind of saying Norwich City will get there, they will improve, and they are missing pieces, and maybe that will be the case. But at this moment in time, it just all feels a little bit stodgy in terms of what they're trying to do, particularly when you watch them in possession. Sometimes you will watch them and it's difficult to try and see a clear, coherent plan, and that's not necessarily a criticism at this stage. I just think that's probably forced because they've got one side that wants to play inside, so all of their shape basically gets lopsided. A lot of the attacking play comes down the right, and that makes life very difficult. And yeah, there are a few structural problems that they've got at the moment, which may well be resolved by having a natural left-back who's left-footed, who can take the ball and open the space a bit more. They haven't got players at the moment on that left side who want to go down the line, essentially, so the play's being funneled inside. When you've got a midfield that's struggling anyway, and you've got a right side who, again, wants to be slightly inverted in terms of the forward player, and then a fullback bombing on, you create a very narrow system, and that's what Norwich are at the moment. And when you have a game like this where a lot of the space is on the outside because of the way West Brom defended, you're going to find it difficult. You're going to find it difficult to play through the lines when their structure is so compact and their shape is so good, and the space they leave between each kind of positional row is so slight. It makes it very difficult for players to get into pockets and to try and make things happen, and for Norwich to progress the ball in central areas. So that's probably why Dean Smith will be frustrated today, because and I've just listened to his post-match press conference, he spoke about how he wanted his fullbacks to push on a little bit more, and that wasn't really forthcoming. He spoke about how he felt his forward line didn't really click, and the midfield really struggled. Gavi Sara in particular he listed, but the whole midfield I just felt really struggled to get to grips with what is a physical West Brom midfield. Jake Livermore, I thought, had a quietly very good game today. I think it's probably one that you can file under one of those days, but by the same token, we're still stood here, and I'm still stood here saying I don't think the performance was very good, yet Norwich have 19 points out of 21. So there's a juxtaposition there. Now, people will look at that and say, at some point, that trend won't continue, because eventually, I believe anyway, and it is just my belief, people may disagree, your performances eventually marry up with results, and it's why I think under Daniel Farke, when they've had slow starts, when we've seen really good performances, there was always a belief that they would come good, and at the moment, the performances aren't fully there, but also they're winning football matches. So again, for me, it's just going to be interesting to see whether that continues and whether they can get an uplift out of their performances after the international break, and whether they can continue to bring those results with them, because they probably haven't, and Dean Smith has admitted this as well, they probably haven't had the control that they would like in recent games, and that includes today, which was really interesting. Right, let's run through how this game unfolded then. West Brom made 4 changes, Norwich made 1, Gavi Sara coming in for Todd Campbell. 9 minutes, Norwich City give West Brom the biggest gift really they can give. Fair play to Sam Byram, as I say, spoke to him after the game. He kind of held his hands up and accepted responsibility. Kind of cited a lack of communication, but both managers spoke about kind of these basketball-esque blocks at the back post. Byram gets blocked off. O'Shea's allowed to kind of drift in from a wide area and just nod it into the back of the net. And when you can see the goal like that from a set piece, it looks abysmal. It looks dreadful. When actually in reality it's probably a combination of Norwich City not wriggling out of those blocks well enough at the back post, and also West Brom applying those blocks really well. And obviously the free header is poor, but ordinarily Sam Byram would wriggle across and then go to compete with a header or try and block off his run. That didn't happen in this instance because of a clever bit of play before that. So it was a well-worked set piece from West Brom's perspective. James Morrison, their set piece coach, would have been absolutely delighted with it. Alan Russell from Norwich City's perspective certainly wouldn't have been, and I'm sure they will go away, certainly not the next week, but maybe the week after, do a little bit on how to untangle themselves from those type of blocks. And from there on, West Brom were comfortable, and actually it felt like if there was a period where they could go and win the game and score more goals, it was that period, because they had Norwich on the ropes. Norwich started sluggishly, they were slow, and West Brom were getting real joy. They had a moment down the other end of the pitch where John Swifty's played in, he takes a touch away from Grant Hanley. Grant Hanley sort of comes through and barges him, he's quite clumsy. Steve Bruce is adamant it's a penalty. I've only seen it back once, I think it would have been soft. It's one of the cliched, you've seen them given kind of decisions. However, I felt if that was from a Norwich City perspective, I think Dean Smith probably would have been quite annoyed that it wasn't a penalty, although he kind of cited that there was a foul earlier in the build-up. So maybe there was the consistency from a referee's perspective to let them both go. So that was that. Steve Bruce felt it was a penalty. Obviously, Dean Smith didn't. Norwich really struggled to create anything from the rest of the half. Gabby Sarah hit the bar with an audacious effort after Sam Byron played him in over the top. I'm trying to think on top of my head, but I don't think there was really any other notable chances after that. I was kind of expecting Norwich to come out a little bit revitalised with maybe some stinging words from Dean Smith in their ears. That wasn't necessarily the case. It was the same kind of stodgy, sluggish, lethargic performance that we saw carry into the second half. And again, it was a lot of watching players move up to the halfway line, or Norwich moving the ball up to the halfway line, and then conceding possession. And it was kind of baffling at sometimes, actually, that you had different players stepping in, committing space, bringing the ball up the pitch, and then the next pass they would make would repetitively be absolutely horrendous, either into touch or to their opponents. And it was a really bizarre game, because Norwich were having a lot of possession, but they were conceding a lot of possession as well. And they didn't quite manage to find their man a lot of the time, but also to progress the ball, as I spoke about earlier. And actually, obviously there was a lot of talk pre this game over whether Ben Gibson would start because of Grant Hanley's injury. I think Grant Hanley is the best defensive defender, if that makes sense. And by that I mean sort of basic defensive abilities, aerially, in terms of how he reads the game. I think all the defensive components, basically beyond distribution, I think he's the best at this level in that. But actually, Ben Gibson probably would have given Norwich a better balance. He would have opened up that left side a little bit more. He would have helped Norwich progress the ball a little bit. Now we can have a debate and say, well, the midfield wasn't quite structured in a way that maybe would have accommodated that anyway. But it's food for thought, I'm sure, and easy to say kind of after the event. If Grant Hanley's fit at the moment, you play Grant Hanley because of how good that partnership was or has been, and even now they haven't conceded too many chances. Norwich's goal, like the game, really bizarre. Short corner that Norwich worked well. Ball comes over to Hernandez. He tees up. No, it's Ramsey who tees up Pookie, I think. His shot then hits Byram, who is almost trying to get out of the way of it. I've seen two replays now. I'm not sure if it hits his chest or his arm. Dean Smith seemed to think it was t-shirt line. Sam Byram wasn't himself sure. He kind of felt it went chest and then arm. But it deflected off him into the back of the net. And it was kind of the luck that Norwich City needed probably to get back into this game, because it certainly wasn't looking like something they were capable of doing from open play. Aaron Ramsey, by the way, just to mention him, was Norwich City's best player today. Just added a bit of creativity, variation, had a little bit of spark, dropped the shoulder really nicely at points, in lovely bits of combination play with his colleagues as well. Slowly beginning to be a very watchable, very talented player in this Norwich City side. And that was it, really. Norwich had a chance late on. Sam Byram again. Dow just clipped a lovely ball over the top. It was kind of deflected and went out of play. And that was your lot. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than be good, if you've heard that phrase. And at the moment, and certainly today, Norwich City were very fortunate to come away with this with a point because of how fatigued and lethargic their performance was overall. And now obviously we all break up for an international break in 2 weeks, where a lot of Norwich's players will fly around the globe participating for their international sides. Norwich will have about 6 at base, so it's not even going to be a period where Dean Smith can really work on various aspects of Norwich City's game. A couple of headlines, I suppose. Isaac Hayden set to return to Norwich City training next week. Massive. Blackpool, I suspect, will come too soon. Norwich have an under-21 game before that I suspect him to feature in on the Friday night, I believe, before we head to Blackpool. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to have a break from it. Obviously, the table shows Norwich in second place. I do think West Brom will start winning games. Whether that comes under Steve Bruce or not, I'm not sure, because eventually the patience will run out with him if results continue in this manner, irrespective of where performances are. And he's fully understanding of that. And actually, what I can foresee happening is a new manager coming in at West Brom, winning quite a few games without maybe not really making too many difference and looking really, really amazing. That was Norwich City's toughest test today. Don't believe what the table reads in terms of West Brom's position. I'd be absolutely gobsmacked if they're anywhere near the position they're in come May. So there we go. I think that's everything. We're going to, obviously, we'll have all of the coverage at Pinken.com, Pinken Plus app as well over this international break as we kind of take a breather from Championship action. And look, context is king. Norwich have 19 points from 21. They're second in the Championship. It's going to be a really interesting run, I think, between when we get back at Blackpool to the World Cup break and whether we see any kind of real uplift in terms of Norwich City performance and what that probably does for their results. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for watching throughout the season so far. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of the game down below in the comments as well. As I said, plenty more content across our other channels. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening. Enjoy your international break. Go and watch some local football next weekend, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Cheers.